Trust is important for all of us as healthcare practitioners, whether you're working in private practice, out in the community or in the public sector. We're talking to Vanessa Hall, the Trust Lady. She's going to share with us some tips on how we can work out the level of trust within our organisation or between clients and how we can improve that. Today we're here speaking with the Trust Lady, Vanessa Hall, who is an International Ambassador for Trust. Vanessa, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So Vanessa, something that's really interesting is the name of your business, Entente. It's not spelt that way, but that's how it's pronounced. Can you tell me a little bit about what does that mean and where does it originate from?
Yeah, Entente's French for understanding and good relationships.
Yeah.
And I loved the way it's written. It's a nice balanced word, and I love what it means because it's that whole sense of understanding, developing an understanding with each other, and building good relationships, which is ultimately what I'm all about.
And how did you get into this area of trust? It's an unusual specialty.
Yeah, I think I had a lifetime of thinking that everyone was breaking down my trust, and you know, that I was a bit of a victim of mistrust, although I probably wouldn't have called myself that at the time. Had a career in compliance and risk management, so I worked at the mistrust end of business and saw some horrific things in that. A lot of breakdown of trust, a lot of dealing with legislation that's really only there because there's been a breakdown of trust, and that's how we respond to that. But it was actually something that my son gave to me for Mother's Day, coming up to 5 years ago now.
Wow.
And I'm actually going to show it to you. So he made it at school, and he's very excited about giving it to me. And it says, My mum is loving and caring. Yeah. She likes to buy lots of clothes. She always writes and reads. Sometimes she can keep promises. But the best thing about my mum is she's always there for me. And I'm not quite sure, it's one of those pictures, there's floppy dogs, so I wasn't quite sure he was trying to tell me about my
Some love hearts.
There are love hearts too. And I said to him, what do you mean? Sometimes she can keep promises. I said, what's that about? And, can you give me an example? And he said, well, a couple of weekends ago you said we'd go to the movies on the weekend and then we didn't go. And you know, I remembered what happened. Some people popped in and we just got busy. And I said to him, but that wasn't a promise. And he said to me, but I thought it was.
Yeah.
And then I thought about all the times that I did that with him, and I started thinking about the times I did that with other people. And my head went into a bit of a spin, and I said to him, what happens when I do that? How does that make you feel? And he sat on the end of my bed and he looked me straight in the eye and he said, I don't know when I can trust you.
Wow, a 9-year-old.
A 9-year-old. And that
Rattled
absolutely
you.
planted
Wow.
the seed for me. I guess what happened at that point was I went from being thinking that everyone else broke down my trust to all of a sudden I was the one actually doing it. And I thought, well, if I'm doing it, either I'm a really bad mother or
No,
we're all doing it.
right.
We're all doing it all the time.
And not noticing.
And not actually realising that this is what we're doing. So, yeah, which is thankfully what I found.
So we're talking to health professionals here. How important do you think trust is in the healthcare setting?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, there's a number of aspects, I think, in the health profession that are worth noting from a trust point of view. One is the whole concept of self-trust, of recognising that, you know, when we go down a path of wanting to get healthy or get fit, that what we have to understand is that we first have to have that trust in ourselves in order to do that. There are so many people that I meet that I'm sure you know you meet, and the health professionals you know who are watching this will meet who think that they want to get healthy and they think they want to get fit, but the one thing that blocks them is the negative expectations that they have of themselves, and so they or they don't have a need that's great enough to make them actually want to stick with a program and stay healthy.
And is self-trust, is that important for people who are caring for others as well, so for the actual health professional themselves?
Absolutely, absolutely. Recognising that the best that they can be is when they can actually trust themselves in the role that they do.
And how can we build self-trust in ourselves and in others, do you think? I know it's probably a lot more complex than that, but you know, what's a couple of things that we could do?
There's three main components that I talk about. I have a model for trust, which is it's drawn like a wall, and the three main components are our expectations, the expectations that we have of ourselves in a self-trust situation, and when we're talking about relationships with others, it's the expectations that we have of others and that they have of us. The second part of that is needs, and I usually draw on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's usually quite well known. But understanding that there are different needs that we actually look for relationships, we look for products and services and things that are going to meet our needs. From a self-trust point of view, we need to find ways to meet those needs for ourselves. So how do I feel more confident myself rather than always looking for other people to make me feel good about myself? Just as an example. And then the third part of this wall, which sits across the top, of the promises that are made by others.
Yeah.
So in a self-trust situation, they're the promises that we make to ourselves.
And sometimes it's like, as you were saying with your son, it might not be explicitly, I promise.
Yes. Yeah. And I talk about explicit promises as well as implicit promises. So they're the things
Can you
that
explain
we
the difference for me?
So an explicit promise is something that we very, very clearly state, or it's written down. It might be in a contract, or it could be on a product label, for a product. So it's very, very clear on what's being promised and what we're going to get. An implicit promise is the things that we don't say. They're the things that we imply. It could be a suggestion. It might be. It could be in the brand or the size of an organisation, for instance, the kind of person that you are. The fact that you are a health professional, there's implied promises there about, your qualification, your ability to help people, the kind of person that you are. There may not be things that you ever say, but they're implied.
They're expected.
And then they're expected from you as well. Yeah.
So in the health profession, there's a lot of people, a lot of different places that we work. One of them is in like large organisations like government departments. There's a couple of different roles here. So we've got, the frontline health professionals. We've also got the managers. Let's have a look at both of those. Tell me a little bit about trust for the frontline employees. Why is it important, and how can we build trust between, management in kind of a bureaucratic system? I know you work a lot with those types of organisations, so.
Yeah, look, in a business context, we look at what we call the 3 R's of trust, which is results, retention, relationships. We know that when you have trust, when you build trust, you get better results, whether that's profitability or just more motivated staff. You get, better retention, so better staff retention levels. People stick around when they can trust their management and they trust the organisation. Customers stay and they keep buying from you if they can trust you. And then we look at the relationship levels. So what are the relationships like? How are people getting on with each other inside the organisation, and the relationships with customers as well? So we know that when we build trust, we get those 3 things. What happens though inside organisations, and it can happen right from the very start, even bringing somebody into the organisation, is the promises that are often made in the job ads, in the job interviews,
on the website, company website.
That's right, from a branding point of view and things. So there are loads of promises that are made, there are expectations that are built. Marketing taps into the needs of people, and so it'll make promises also to meet those needs. And the more the promises that we make meet the expectations and needs of others, the more they're drawn to that over and above anything else. So it can be used to bring those people into the organisation, but then from day one, if those promises are not being met, or the expectations that they have are not being met, then this wall, a shot like a wall, it can start to break down very, very quickly.
So what you're saying is that we have to align our promises with what's actually really happening?
Yeah, absolutely.
I know it sounds basic, but it's not.
It does
not always done, is it?
No, it's not. And I think we can often fall into the trap of, I think we instinctively know that if I make a promise that's something that you want, then you're going to engage with me. What we've forgotten, or we just simply haven't realised, is the damage that's caused when that then isn't delivered. So if I encourage you, come and join my organisation because it's something I promised you, and then I don't do that, I'm not going to get the best out of you, that I would want, and ultimately, staff will leave because then their whole trust in a wall has completely broken down.
And how do we know the level of trust within our organisation or team? How do we know whether the trust is there? Because sometimes I think we think it might be there, but it might not be. Is that common, or?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a difficult thing to measure. One of the things that we look at is where is trust currently being built.
Isn't it a shame that we can't kind of tick it off like a balance sheet? Yep, trust, tick.
I think ultimately it comes down to how people feel inside an organisation. We can look at where trust is being built and where it's breaking down through a series of questions and things. We have a survey that we used to do that. But simply, just for yourself to know, you'll know when you don't have trust, when there's morale issues, if you've got a lot of customer complaints and things happening, you'll know just by simply how people are feeling, if there's gossip, if people are frustrated, if they're annoyed or they're disappointed.
So we've got to take notice, maybe that's the key.
Yeah. And I think recognising, even in our own personal relationships and with ourselves, any time you're feeling that sense of you're disappointed with yourself or with other people, or you're frustrated, you're angry, you're confused, what's happening is you don't know, it's something that you've expected hasn't happened, something that you needed wasn't delivered, or something that was promised to you hasn't been kept. And it's, or a combination of those things. But anytime we feel these things, they're actually warning signs that trust is breaking down.
And when we look at communities, sometimes as health professionals, we're asked to go into communities and fix a problem. We know trust is important there, but how can we build trust between communities that we might not be a member of that community or culture? How can we build trust in those situations if we're trying to help people?
Yeah, I think one of the important things is to first understand what their expectations are of you as a health professional, and of each other in a community. One of the biggest challenges that we have to deal with when we're building trust, particularly if it's in a low trust community, and I mean I go into some countries and things now where there are low levels of trust. But when we have negative expectations, what happens is that we don't believe the promises that are being made to us. It's much easier, if we've got a negative expectation and a positive promise, it's easier for us to continue to believe the negative expectation because that's ours, and it's usually based on our own previous experience. So we can believe that before we'll believe what somebody else coming along is promising us, until that person can prove to us that they're right and that maybe we need to change. So one of the challenges initially in going into communities is understanding what all the expectations are, and are there any negative ones that we have to actually really focus on and deal with, because nothing will shift until that negative expectation shifts. It's about understanding the needs then of the community as well. Are they a community that's about safety and security? That's their primary need. Or are they a community that needs a sense of love and belonging, or a community that needs a level of respect? The more we understand the driving needs behind people and communities, the better we can actually meet those and do things to meet those, and that builds the trust as well. And then obviously being careful about what we're promising. What are we here to do? Simply by being there, you're promising things already.
Exactly.
Just turning up is a promise. And so recognising that, and then being able to manage the expectations then of that community. Why am I here, and what can you expect by me being here? What am I promising you? The more explicit we can be about that, the better.
Vanessa, thank you so much for speaking with us today. You've given us lots of insights to think about.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
We've just been speaking with Vanessa Hall about how to build self-trust, trust in communities and trust in organisations. Vanessa, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Thanks for having me, Tara.